Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out on this summer Sunday as we're heading into peak vacation season. I love that you made the time to come here, so thank you. We're going to start with opening words from Henry David Thoreau from probably his most famous book, Walden, which was published in 1854. This is from section 2, which he called Where I Lived and What I Lived For. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why then get to the whole and genuine meanness of it, and publish its meanness to the world. Or, if it were sublime, to know it by experience, and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. With that, let's take a moment to greet the folks around us, whether you're here in the fellowship hall, here online. Say hello to someone nearby.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury. My name is Darlene Anderson Alexander, and my pronouns are she and her. I've been connected with this congregation since 1991 and have served in a variety of capacities, and this morning I'm your Sunday Services Coordinator. I'm so glad that you were able to be with us this morning, either here in person or via Zoom, because you are each an essential part of our gathering today. Whether this is your first or 1,000th Sunday in our midst, we are stronger because you are with us. Together, we create this community. Here at UU Danbury, our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. We have no shared creed, but rather a shared covenant. A covenant that is expressed through the inseparably shared values of justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity, all deeply connected through love. As a congregation, we have been gathering together for over 200 years. And as we work to build a more just world, we respectfully acknowledge that our physical building here on Clapboard Ridge Road is on the traditional unceded land ancestrally connected to the Pequasit, Schaghticoke, Pequannock, and Wappinger people. Our roots are deep and yet, of course, imperfect. For those of you who are new to UUCD, let me explain that this congregation is ministerial led by our half-time minister, Reverend Tony Lorenzen. But when Reverend Tony is not with us, roughly 2 Sundays each month and during the summer, we are fortunate to be led in worship by a variety of lay leaders from our congregation, guest speakers, and our Director of Family Ministry. This morning, we welcome Samantha McCoy to the pulpit. Sam has been a member of UUCD since 2003 and has served on family ministry, including being a coming-of-age mentor and an Our Whole Lives instructor, Sunday services, and the Board of Trustees at various times. She's now part of UUCD's lay preaching team and leads services a couple of times each year. Outside of UUCD, Sam is the academic dean at Greens Farms Academy in Westport and a history teacher. She lives in Newtown with her spouse, Brian, and her 15, I can't believe it, year-old son, Ethan. Yeah. And 2 rambunctious boy cats who they did not bring with them today. We have several announcements in our order of service, so you can give those a look when you have a minute. I don't think we have any kiddos here. No. And in addition to the order of service, we have a weekly email newsletter. So if you're not on that, you can reach out to our office manager and she'll get you on that list. We have an events calendar on our website at uudanbury.org that also lists our complete events calendar. So now we're going to be lighting our chalice, assisted by the lovely Lisa. We make this time and this place holy simply by being together. And we begin by lighting the flaming chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. So please join me in reciting this morning's words to light our chalice, written by Reverend Barnaby Feeder. We kindle a flame we trust will lead us forward as we travel in unknown lands, where the question, shall I ever get there, resounds a clear, pure note in every silence. And we speak our shared covenant together. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and justice is its light. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek and speak the truth in love, to help one another and celebrate life. And I just want to let you know that childcare and programming is paused for the summer, but families with young children are always welcome in our services. And those who wish may also use the lower level. Heather's there today. The main area and nursery, there she is. I didn't know where you were. The main area and the nursery are located down the stairs, and there are monitors that can be set up to view the service. An adult must stay with the children. Regular programming will resume in the fall. So thank you. And now, if you would like to rise in body and or spirit and join in singing our hymn of welcome for the beauty of the earth, which is number 21 in the gray hymnal. We're going to do our children's affirmation now. It's a nice time for everybody to stretch, even if you're not a child. So get those U's high in the sky. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. We care for the earth and each other. Wonderful. Okay, we have a great story for you today. It's called Bear Came Along, written by Richard T. Morris and illustrated by Lewin Pham. There's Bear. Once there was a river that flowed night and day, but it didn't know it was a river until Bear came along. Bear was just being curious when he realized what the river could do. But he didn't know he was on an adventure until Froggy hopped on. Froggy was a lonely frog who was looking for a friend, but she didn't know how many she had until the turtles showed up. The turtles tried to warn them about the things that could go wrong, but they didn't know how to enjoy the ride until Beaver climbed aboard. Beaver was born to be a captain. He knew exactly where to go, but he didn't know about the detours until the raccoons dropped in. Oh, the raccoons were so excited about the twists and the turns ahead, but they didn't know they had to be careful until they crashed into Duck. Duck was so content being right where she was, but she didn't know there was a world to see. Until, until, uh-oh, Bear held on to Froggy. Froggy held on to the turtles. Turtles held on to Beaver. Beaver held on to the raccoons. Raccoons held on to Duck. Oh, what a ride. So many different animals living their separate lives. But they didn't know they were in it together until the river came along. And in the back of the wonderfully illustrated book, if you look very carefully, you can see little groups of friends that we talked about, but also all the other animals along the river who they might still get to meet. So that's what Sam's going to kind of talk to us about today during the service this morning. All right, we're going to sing This Little Light of Mine. Now we enter into the time in our service when we share the milestones of our lives with one another. It is a time of coming together as a community in quiet contemplation, verses 1 through 3. But first, a moment of silence.
Sorry.
This morning's reading was written by a man named Benton McCoy in 1921. He was a very early proponent of the idea of the Appalachian Trail and tried to begin bringing people together to create it. And the pieces I'm going to read you are from an article he published in 1921 in the Journal of the American Institute of Architects. And I'll also just point out, again, I can't resist. If you think about 1921 and try to put that into context, you might want to remember that we were just a couple years removed from fighting in World War I, and you're going to feel some flavor of that in this piece. Something has been going on in this country during the past few strenuous years, which, in the din of war and general upheaval, has been somewhat lost from the public mind. It is the slow, quiet development of a special type of community, the recreation camp. It is something neither urban nor rural. It escapes the hecticness of the one, the loneliness of the other. And it escapes also the common curse of both, the high-powered tension of the economic scramble. We civilized ones, whether urban or rural, are potentially as helpless as canaries in a cage. The ability to cope with nature directly, unshielded by the weakening wall of civilization, is one of the admitted needs of modern times. The camp community is a sanctuary and a refuge from the scramble of everyday worldly commercial life. It is, in essence, a retreat from profit. Cooperation replaces antagonism. Trust replaces suspicion. Emulation replaces competition. An Appalachian Trail, with its camp, communities, and the spheres of influence along the skyline, should, with reasonably good management, accomplish these achievements, and they possess within them the elements of a deep dramatic appeal. Indeed, the lure of the scouting life can be made the most formidable enemy of the lure of militarism, a thing with which this country is menaced along with all others. It comes the nearest, perhaps, of things thus far projected to supplying what Professor James once called a moral equivalent of war. It appeals to the primal instincts of a fighting heroism, of volunteer service, and of work in a common cause. Militarism has been made colorful in a world of drab, but the care of the countryside, which the scouting life instills, is vital in any real protection of home and country. Already basic, it can be made spectacular. Here is something to be dramatized.
When we give our time and energy to the work of this congregation, and when we donate to its financial support, we are giving gifts to each other. Each one gives to and receives gifts from all of our members and friends, and together we give to the community around us. To give financially electronically this morning, you may use the QR code that's projected above, and you may also mail a check to UUCD at 24 Clapboard Ridge Road in Danbury. To offer food donations for our neighbors who visit Dorothy Day Hospitality House, please hold your food up high and it will be collected, hopefully. This morning's offerings will now be gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity.
The day before I interviewed for my current job, my spouse, my son, and I went on a hike. It was February 20th, 2023, and it had been an unseasonably warm President's Day weekend. The target we chose was Bear Mountain in Salisbury, Connecticut, which is the highest peak in Connecticut on the Appalachian Trail. After analyzing the topography, we decided that the way we'd attack it would be to go from north to south, approaching Bear Mountain in such a way that the steepest part would go uphill, and then we'd get a gentler return downhill on the way back. When you come at Bear Mountain from the north, the access trail you need to get to the actual AT takes you into Massachusetts, which felt pretty neat that I was crossing a state line on a hike because I'd never done something like that before. Hey, all right. See, we have some photographic support this morning. Amazing. Thank you to my friends with the slides. So as we began to make headway and gain altitude, we noticed a decent amount of ice still remaining in various crevices and low spots near the trail. This shouldn't have been surprising because it was February in Connecticut, but it had also been over 50 degrees for a few days and there wasn't any snow remaining near us at home. The north side of Bear Mountain, however, did not care about the 50-degree weather. It had ice buildup that had been there for months, where the sun only hit for a small portion of each day, and it wasn't going anywhere just due to a little warm spell. As we got closer and closer to the summit, the trail got steeper, and it was basically a case of scrambling over rocks rather than actually walking on the ground. Sheer rocks coated in ice are not now, and were not then, my idea of a good time. Ethan, who was 12 at that point, was a little bit like a mountain goat. He just kind of scrambled up over it with very little fear. Brian has a nice 6-foot frame and long legs, and he was able to get better footholds and scaled those rocks. I, however, at barely 5'2", was having a rougher time of it. And at one point, I was facing the set of rocks that were just coated with ice. And in an attempt to avoid that hazard, I broke a cardinal rule of good hiking practice, which is to stay on the trail. And I shifted about 10 feet to one side, attempting to move through some brambles instead of the icy rock. And that wasn't great either, but it seemed preferable. None of that worked quite the way I intended. And at one point, Ethan and Brian heard me shriek as I slid down about 6 feet of muddy rocks and sticks and low bushes and things. And thankfully, there was another rock that I caught my feet on and I was able to stop sliding. And I was shaken up, but I was okay. My clothes and my hands were really dirty. I had some scrapes along my torso, but it wasn't anything that wouldn't heal up after I got showered and cleaned up. I didn't take pictures of my scrapes, but I did grab a quick shot of my dirt-covered jeans, which is the only surviving evidence of my fall. And thankfully, the summit was not far away at that point. When we got there, I felt great about arriving at the famous cairn at the top, and we also got the benefit of some gorgeous views that day. The next day, as I sat in the head of school's office for my interview, he asked me if I'd done anything interesting over the holiday weekend. And I told him a little bit about Bear Mountain, but I left out the more salacious details. I remember thinking I was really glad my face hadn't gotten any of the scrapes. I was grateful that I hadn't slid any further and hurt myself. And then eventually, a few days later, I got a call that they wanted to hire me. So it turned out to be a pretty auspicious week in the long run. So why did we choose that hike on that day in February 2023? Somewhere along the way of Ethan growing up, and he and Brian being involved in Scouts, and the three of us just spending more time outdoors during the pandemic, Brian started suggesting that we hike parts of the Appalachian Trail. I had heard of the AT, but I'd never consciously been on it or looked into it in any great detail. I knew in a general sense that it spanned many, many miles from Georgia to Maine, or vice versa, and that somehow folks, some of them paused their lives for months at a time to go out and hike the entire thing. And I guess because I had heard about those really committed through hikers, I had put the AT in like a box in my mind that was labeled things other people do. But when Brian got hooked on this idea of like we're going to do the AT. And he started researching the trail in Connecticut and the parking access and the elevations and all these things. He has books with maps. You should see his collection of things. Slowly, it began to seem like something we could do in small pieces, at least. And that set us on a path toward hiking all of the Appalachian Trail miles here in Connecticut. Ethan was growing up and building stamina. We would identify sections of the trail where there were parking areas fairly close together, or the climbing would be like minimal and the elevation not so bad. We learned that the River Road section in Kent, even though it's 5 miles between parking areas, has virtually no altitude gain, and it's mostly a winding ramble along the Housatonic River. And after we did that section, we began to feel like we could do more of it. And over the next few years, we began trying other parts and taking on more strenuous climbs and longer distances. And the more time we spent on those sections of the trail, the more I got into it too. Like Brian, I also became determined to complete those miles in Connecticut. Before I go too much further, I should be clear about a few things though. In general, there's nothing extreme about the kind of hiking I like to do. I stick to trails that are well marked and well traveled. I am not a backpacker. Sleeping in the woods is not really my idea of a good time, although I'm open to the possibility that maybe I just haven't had the right experience yet. But having to travel with and manage my food and my toiletry needs for days at a time feels kind of overwhelming. So as much as I may have been getting excited about completing more of the trail, I wasn't going all in the way other folks do. But I was willing to push myself slightly out of my comfort zone in order to cover some more of those miles. In recent months, I found myself questioning why I became so interested in this quest. Sure, I appreciate nature and I love wildlife. I very much enjoy being away from large numbers of people. There are few things I like more than wandering in a stretch of woods where all I hear is my own feet crunching on the path, some birds overhead, maybe some squirrels or chipmunks rustling around at ground level. You can get that kind of thing on all kinds of hiking trails, though. The AT is not a specific prerequisite for an introspective outdoor experience. Even so, as much as we've hiked a variety of trails around New York and Connecticut, there's something special to me about seeing the unique AT logo, the signature white blazes, and the occasional green direction signs. By the way, I feel like that one that says it's like 1,400 kilometers to Georgia is just taunting you, kind of like, if you want to go to Georgia, good luck. I had heard, but I went back and researched as I was writing this. There's a general consensus in the eastern part of the US that those white, oh, you can't see one of these. You'll see it on another one. The 6x2 white rectangles are designated just for the AT. Other state trails, other parks, they use like other colors and other shapes. But when you see that white rectangle, you know where you are. And before I dive deeper into what I think all this means, I want to share a few of the other peculiarities I've noticed along the way. First, because we're in New England, there is no shortage of rocks. Typically, those white blazes are on trees, but sometimes there are no trees. There are just rocks. So many rocks. And this image is from a section of the trail in Kent, Connecticut known as St. John's Ledges. And you'll notice those white marks, if you can make them out, they're only on rocks because there are no trees right there. We did this somewhat early in our AT quest, and I wasn't sure, the morning we did that, I wasn't sure this was a good idea because I go into the woods to be on the ground, not to climb rocks. But that said, it wasn't as bad as I thought, and I felt pretty darn good about myself after we got through those rocks and back onto regular soil. But while those rocks were an obstacle to be overcome, there are other rocks along the trail that are really useful, like this staircase we came upon in Sherman in April 2021. There are innumerable places along the way where AT hikers come upon a construction like this, painstakingly crafted by volunteer groups that maintain the trail. Sometimes these features are installed to help hikers, sometimes they're there to prevent erosion on a hillside, or some combination of both. And another more permanent example of the way they help hikers get on their way is the Ned Anderson Bridge, which is at the confluence of the 10-mile and Housatonic rivers in between Kent and Sherman, Connecticut. This bridge was built in 1983, and it's named for a man who helped construct large portions of the trail in that region. Side note on bridges, if you want to take the AT through New York, the trail crosses the Hudson River on the Bear Mountain Bridge. We did that section this past spring, and taking the pedestrian walkway across that bridge and back was one of the more terrifying hikes we've ever done, but in a totally different way from that Bear Mountain experience. I have no photos of us on the bridge because I was too busy minding the cars going by and trying not to look at the distance between myself and the water below. But now let's come back to this idea of giving. Volunteerism shows at a large scale at the campsites, very much along the lines of what Benton McCoy envisioned in that article from 1921. There are dozens of designated campsites along the AT, and every time I come upon one, I marvel at some of the things I find there. Even though we've never slept overnight at one of these, we typically walk in and look around and see what's there. Some of the features aren't surprising, like pavilions, latrines, or bear boxes for safe food storage. But sometimes you find something designed completely for enjoyment, like the viewing platform and the swing at the Silver Hill campsite in Cornwall Bridge, Connecticut. Now, you can't see the swing very well. I know it's off to the side there on that right side picture, but you can pick, if I had a close up of it, there's a beautiful wooden swing somebody installed. And I love the idea that something like this exists in the woods purely to create a joyful shared experience. The folks who built these amenities will never meet all the people who use them, but they did so to support a culture of being outdoors and to encourage people to enjoy those protected lands. Many of the pavilions or shelters also have built-in boxes or nooks that hold sign-in books where hikers share everything from their name and the date they were there to sometimes comments and observations about what they saw. And maybe it's the historian in me, but I love passing through a place and finding hard evidence, documentary evidence of those who came before and were in that very same spot. I'm well aware that this is meant to be a sermon, not a travel log, and I promise I'm not going to show you 1,000 photos, but I have a handful more. Every place has a history, but the interstate century-long legacy of the AT shows up in some unique ways. Sometimes it's a piece of visible history, like a section of the trail in Fawnstalk State Park in Putnam County, New York, that runs for a bit over an old narrow gauge railroad bed, right? That's kind of cool. Because it snowed a little bit the night before we were there, you can kind of see where the railroad bed's coming through there. Or there's a painting commemorating those who were lost on 9/11 atop the portion of Shenandoah Mountain in Kent, New York. One of the more memorable to me, though, has to be the Telephone of the Wind, an art installation, which is near a roadway crossing for the trail in Putnam County. It was inspired by Japanese artist Itaru Sasaki, who created the first telephone of the wind near his home after thousands died in the 2011 tsunami in Japan. His idea was that an unconnected telephone gives someone a unique method to try and speak to another that they've lost. And since then, other artists and grief counselors have installed their own telephones of the wind, and one of them just happens to sit along the AT. Sometimes you quite literally never know what you might encounter on the trail. And then finally, there's the through hiker culture that those of us on the outside will probably never fully comprehend. In 2019, we had a longtime friend in town visiting from California, and we decided to spend our 4th of July on a short stretch of the AT, again in Dutchess County. The section we did that morning in Pauling includes a famous landmark, the Dover Oak. The Dover Oak is a tree believed to be over 300 years old with a 22-foot circumference and reaches about 110 feet in height. Seeing the tree itself was impressive enough, but the first time we went through that section, we ran into 3 young men who were through hiking the trail with their dog. They decided to pause in the shade of that giant tree and fill their 4-legged friend's water dish and take a short break. And as we also paused for water before going back to our car, we struck up a conversation with them. They had started in Georgia several weeks earlier, and they were working their way toward Maine, and their hope was to finish before the end of August, before things got too cold up north. The northern terminus of the trail at Mount Katahdin has notoriously unpredictable weather, and there are way too many stories of hikers needing to be rescued from it, so I hope it went well for them. But I have no idea if they actually finished their quest. I sincerely hope, though, that they did. I find myself thinking about them every time we're on the trail, though. I picture them and their pup making their way across the paths and obstacles that we're crossing on our little day hikes. And for me, each of these factors brings sort of a mystical quality to the Appalachian Trail experience. Over the past century plus, various groups of like minded people have taken the time to develop, protect, and manage a trail that spans more than 2,200 miles across 14 states. While somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 people through hike in a given year, the Park Service estimates that approximately 3 million Americans use the AT in some capacity annually. The permanent trailside communities that Benton McCoy wished for in 1921 didn't ever quite come to fruition, but the trail still builds community in the folks one meets along the way, the temporary companions who share campsites and shelters on any given night, and in the neighboring towns where hikers can step off the trail and restock their supplies or get cleaned up periodically. It's not too different from Bear and his friends enjoying the river in our story earlier. Those local volunteers who spend hours and hours throughout the year clearing down trees and slowly levering rocks into position along the trail aren't doing it for financial gain or even a friendly slap on the back. They believe in the power of being out in nature and the community that goes beyond traditional borders. Carrying that belief to fruition, I think, is a type of magic. And for me, just being on that trail feels like I've been welcomed into a secret world, something that exists just for those who seek it out. When I'm tramping through the woods and I find a stone staircase laid out, or a helpful footbridge to cross a stream, or even some log walkways to keep our feet out of swampy, boggy areas, I think about all the effort it must have taken to haul those supplies into place and get the equipment to put it all together. I imagine the time and the sweat that had to be given to make those amenities a reality. And I'm grateful to those volunteers, and I know I've been given a gift from someone I'll probably never meet. I also understand perfectly well that not everyone is going to go out and hike the Appalachian Trail, nor can everybody physically access the trail. As a side note, though, there are a handful of places along the AT where local volunteers are working to make sections more accessible with wheelchair access points. And one of those is actually up in Falls Village, Connecticut. So you could check that out if you're curious. But the creation of the AT experience over the last century is an example of what's possible by bringing people together in unconventional ways. Where are the other places in our communities where we can create unexpected, magical experiences that our neighbors might stumble upon? Maybe it comes in the form of public art. Perhaps it's a community garden or a section of a local park that you fix up. Maybe it's something in your local library or community center. Or it could be something as simple as leaving a surprise note in a neighbor's mailbox. As we approach the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, I find myself remembering and seeking out what makes me proud and fills me with hope about this nation. And the AT is one of those things. It's not a perfect community by any means, but I appreciate the effort and care that were given to it by so many. When I'm exploring a section of trail, I love the idea that thousands of people over the past century have walked those same areas I'm walking, and then we engaged in a common experience across both time and space. And when I think back on these 250 years of the United States, while it can be tempting sometimes to dwell on the moments and places where things deviated from our core values, today, I want us to remember that there are so many other examples of times when Americans take care of each other, stand up for each other, and work to make communities better and more sustainable for the future. That's what so many people in the US have sought over these last 2.5 centuries, and it's what we also seek as Unitarian Universalists. As Thoreau hoped, it is indeed possible to drive life into a corner and encounter the sublime, perhaps in more places than he would have ever expected. May we all continue to find ways to conjure centuries more beauty and more magic for ourselves and all of our fellow humans.
Thank you, Sam. That was wonderful. Makes me want to get out and hike a little. Yeah, beautiful. Please join me in the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. And now I invite you to rise in body and or spirit for the singing of our hymn of celebration. We sing now together, which is number 67 in the Gray Hymnal.
Some closing words, but you should sit because I can't control myself and it's maybe a little longer than it should be. Okay. It's not super long. Okay. So this is one more short excerpt. This is from a book titled In the Maine Woods, and it was written in 1934 by Myron Avery, who was another early proponent of the trail and was one who really helped get all the different state commissions to start working together and coordinating. But he was from Maine, so he talks about the Maine woods. So he wrote, "To those who would see the Maine wilderness, tramp day by day through a succession of ever delightful forest, past lake and stream and over mountains, we would say, follow the Appalachian Trail across Maine. It cannot be followed on horse or a wheel, remote for detachment, narrow for chosen company, winding for leisure, lonely for contemplation. It beckons not merely north and south, but upward to the body, mind, and soul of man."